Hello and welcome back to the Overcompensated podcast. I am so excited. I'm being joined by Giovanna Ventola. She's the founder of Rhize, which is a global online community supporting job seekers through the emotional, financial, and logistical realities of long-term unemployment. A lot of these people are doing everything right. They had incredibly successful careers, and when you find yourself laid off, she is really helping with these like transitions. She was faced 3 layoffs in 3 years and applied to hundreds of roles and was just able to transform her personal job search struggle into a purpose-driven platform that's helping thousands of people navigate uncertainty with clarity, connection, and courage. So I am so excited for our very candid conversation today about how we can better support people going through these transitions. So thank you so much, Giovanna, for joining me. I would love it if you could quickly introduce yourself, give a little bit about your background, and share how we got connected and you came to this platform today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm super excited for this conversation. We got connected through TikTok, right? I think you sent me a DM and then I was like, we just have to get on a call. So we did that last week. So technically, this is only our second conversation, which is great. Um, a little bit about me. Yeah, I lost my job 3 times in 3 years. Every single time was rough and different. Before that, I had a corporate career, and before my career in corporate, I had a career in the arts. So my formal training and background is in contemporary ballet. And I guess what I always joke about is I used to be involved in a medium that didn't involve voice, and now all I do is use my voice. So kind of comes full circle a little bit.
I absolutely love that. And, this is, your mission is very near and dear to my heart because when I found, what you were talking about on TikTok, like I used to work at LinkedIn. And so I think I specifically saw you like receive like a LinkedIn PR package and then want to like open up a broader discussion, which I feel like is so rare for someone, I see a lot of people who are influencing and content creating and, it's always great to receive free stuff and receive free products, but turning that into a dialogue and turning that into a meaningful conversation is really what resonated for me. So I would love for you to introduce like how you got started, with Rhize, and how that kind of came to fruition.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, I lost my job 3 times in 3 years. My last layoff was the night before Thanksgiving in 2023, which was lost my job and my appetite at the same time. I went through the holidays just like everybody else. It's never a good time to look for work, right? So I thought in January of 2024, I'll get back at it. Things were slow over the holidays, but I had hope. The first couple weeks of January were different. It didn't feel the same. And this was my third layoff. So I had already, been laid off twice prior, had experience, kind of saw different, I guess there wasn't any activity is what I was seeing. And because I had experienced 3 layoffs, I tend to blame myself. I was like, there's got to be something wrong with me. There has to be something wrong with my resume. There has to be something wrong with the way I'm putting myself out there. I must be missing something. So I was afraid to share that on LinkedIn very candidly because it's typically a professional platform and a place for people to share accomplishments and to share, their successes in the work field, whatever they're doing. My cousin is Gen Z and I had never had TikTok, and she's like, why don't you just like try to share it on TikTok and see if you can meet people? And that's literally what I did. So I shared an email template that I used to network, and I shared my resume, and I was like, someone tell me what's wrong with this. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? I really need help. I was very desperate to find work. Quickly realized that this was a bigger topic of conversation. People were talking about unemployment. People were getting laid off every day. And I was so out of it, out of touch with everything because none of my friends or family members were going through it. So I didn't have that like anybody looking at my story and going like, yeah, me too. So I, again, thought it was me. But when I started hearing from more people that they were going through it, I was like, okay, so there's got to be some way we can all come together, right? I recorded a video at the end of February 2024. I was looking for an accountability buddy to like sit down, have virtual coffee with me, do our resumes, do our cover letters, figure it out. I had just learned what the ATS system was. And I put out like a video with a call to action that said, if you want to be my accountability buddy, shoot me an email. And my email was in my bio. And I woke up with hundreds of emails. And I was like, how do hundreds of people talk? I have no idea. The only experience I have with that many people talking in a professional setting was using Slack. So I took everyone and put them in a Slack group, and I named it the Unemployed Community. And that was March 1st of 2024. Got in there and then started meeting people, started talking to people. We started having regular daily networking calls to connect with people. And I quickly realized that like the word unemployed is not the right word to describe these people. Everyone in there was like driven, ambitious, like really wanted to figure it out, really wanted to work. And I think unemployment can be a synonym for laziness. And so people think if you don't have a job, you must be doing something wrong. You must not be trying hard enough. But what I was seeing in front of me was quite the opposite. People that were really showing up every day, applying, putting themselves out there, going to networking events, doing all the things right, the things that we are told to do. And they were struggling just as much as me, if not worse. So all that to say, as the months went on, it was March, April, I didn't get a job, spoiler alert, and my goal was April 1st. The community was growing through my TikTok, and I was manually adding people to the Slack channel. In like April, May of 2024, I had a few people in the group be like, listen, we can like streamline this. We can make it a thing. We rebranded. We called it Rhize, Rhize. It's a shortened version of the word rhizome.
And I feel like, what is really like standing out to me right now is the fact that you said, I thought there was something wrong with me. And I just think it's so clear and so evident that in today's job market and the way that things have evolved, like it is not about the individual. I actually had been saying, I've been thinking this for a while, but, I'm a hiring manager and I truly believe like if someone's in a role for less than 6 months, typically it is not their fault. Like typically, or if like someone goes through a layoff, like that is not their fault. Like I've been at multiple companies. I've been at very large companies that went through layoffs. I've been at smaller startups that went through layoffs. The layoffs are always random. Actually, the first time I was at a company that went through like layoffs, they literally ran a report of the bottom like 15% of performers in the sales organization and cut them for like the last 6 months. And these were people who had like overperformed. They had like, been in President's Club. Like they were some of the top sellers, but because they hadn't sold anything in 6 months. And like a lot of times if you're in enterprise sales, like you get the majority of your job done in the second half of the year. And since the layoffs were in July, they just had cut people who again had performed incredibly the last year. And that's when I realized like these layoffs and people getting impacted by them, it has nothing to do with the individual, with their skill level, with their ability to execute at all. Now, what I will say is we're in a very difficult job market. So I want to kind of take a step back because you said you had started, a career in the arts and ballet, and then you were able to transition to corporate America. So I would love to talk about like how you were able to transition into corporate from, an untraditional background, and why do you think that transition is so much harder for people, or any transition is so much harder for people to make today? Because how long ago was it that you were, first in corporate?
2015. So it's been 10 years.
10 years. That's a huge change in 10 years. Like, how did you make that first transition, and what do you feel like is different, now 10 years later?
That's a really good question, because that transition was really easy for me in 2015. And so I thought I could easily pivot again, or I could easily find something because my transferable skills, right, should be in theory better now. So I had a career in ballet, contemporary ballet. I was a dance teacher. I was working, as anyone does in the arts, multiple jobs. I was a bartender. I was a personal trainer. And I had taken a break. I had burnt out pretty bad. And I had taken a break from the art world and was trying to figure out my next moves. A client of mine at the gym who I had worked with for about 3 years, his company was hiring. They were looking for an executive assistant for the CEO. And the CEO is the founder of the company. The company had been around about 24, 25 years when I started there. But the CEO needed an assistant. And my client at the gym, he was like, I don't know if you're taking a break from the arts world, but if you've ever thought about corporate, I actually think you'd be great for this role. This is what it all entails. Also, you manage me as a client. You can definitely manage like a CEO. He's like, you make sure I'm here on time and working out. You can do anything. And I was like, okay, that's a good point. All that to say, I went in, I met the CEO in person, I met the CFO in person. I was pretty much hired on the spot. The attitude there was very different. So the CEO of that company was a gym teacher, and he didn't start this company until he was in his 40s. So he had a different career path. He understood a different career path. And it was really important for him when he was hiring younger people to come into his company. He made it a point to find people or hire people and not think anything differently or less than if they came from different backgrounds. So we had like a musician, we had somebody who worked as a hotel manager for all these years. Like he had different people that had nothing to do with the industry come into his company and succeed and thrive. So that was 10 years ago. So I'm, facing these layoffs now, and I'm thinking if I can pivot from ballet to commercial real estate development, I can pivot from commercial real estate development to something else, right? Which has not happened.
Oh my goodness. And I feel like, so when you were trying to like make these changes, because it's happened so many times, like what do you feel like is the biggest piece like that's missing in terms of the job search? Because I'm sure you see this all, across so many people at Rhize. Like, is it people not being able to like get that first interview? Is it the people, is it resumes getting screened out? Is it, people applying to like hundreds of jobs and just like no one's getting back to them? Is it, being able to like start conversations with hiring managers and then companies are, changing their mind down the line? Like, what do you feel like, you saw in your kind of search over the like last few years? And then what do you feel like other people are seeing right now?
So I think that we've completely lost the human element of the job search. And I think that the willingness to take a chance on somebody is completely gone. I think right now, time is money, as we all know, and a lot of companies, or I'm going to generalize, and just through my experience and through my members in Rhize, a lot of companies don't want to take the chance to train someone new. And so you need to have like a cookie cutter resume of experience of the software tools that were used, of the processes. Like in theory, they want to have a role and have somebody be able to pop right in without a 90-day onboarding period. Or, to your point before where it's like if you get laid off before 6 months, it's not really your fault, right? Because you need about 6 months to get settled in your position, to figure out what the systems are used, who your team is, especially now with everything virtual, it's a little bit different. So I think that the human element is gone. And I think that in theory, it was great to have the ATS system be able to filter people out, but it also, we can all learn how to beat something. So now it's to the point where people are mass applying. So back to your point of like, when people are sort of feeling the challenges of the job market, first of all, a lot of people are being just completely ghosted. So they'll submit an application and nothing. Like I still get rejection emails from jobs, like auto rejection emails that I applied to a year and a half ago. So it's this like you submit something and it goes nowhere. That happens. For the people that are able to make it to interviews, a lot of times, we just had a conversation earlier today. If they make it to an interview, quite often they make it pretty far in that interview process because it's almost so impossible to make it to the interview that when you do, you're like, oh, I'm going to do my best. And you do your best and you make it to the end and then nothing. Sometimes you get an explanation. Most of the time it's just an auto rejection or a thank you for your time with a, we decided to go with an internal candidate, or we actually closed out the role, we're not hiring. So it's a mix, but I think if I had to like pick one theme, it's the human element of the job search is gone.
And that's really like painful to hear. And that makes me, just feel very like discouraged with where corporate America has like ended up, because I think like on the other side of it, like when you're talking about there's hundreds and hundreds of resumes for every job. You have to remember that like on the corporate side of things, when companies are downsizing, one of the first teams that they're cutting is the recruitment teams. So then when they cut the recruitment teams, then there's no one to filter through all of those resumes. Like I don't get support when I need to like screen and hire candidates. So then, at the next level, that falls down on the managers. So then the managers are, tasked with like, and obviously you have the ATS systems. They do some of the screening. People can, get around the ATS systems. But when you're thinking about the people on the other side who are trying to hire, genuinely, like when there is a role open for their team, they're doing so many other different things because they don't have the same level of support. Like when I started leadership, several years ago, I had the support of recruitment teams doing a lot of like that work for me. And now it's like I can do a fraction of that, because that has just been when companies are talking about like doing more with less. Doing more with less means putting more work on the people who are in those roles, not hiring for as many people, in those roles. So there's no one to disperse like, that level of work across. And so the intentionality is lost. So it's like, I agree, like that human element is difficult to do when like you're so overworked, you're under pressure. Like I'm in a sales role, like, I have a quota, I have things that like, I need to meet. I have people, underneath me who they need my support. So when it comes to recruiting, it's kind of like, we're given maybe we can have as little as a 3-week heads up that you need to fill fill a seat. And so you're just going to go to the easiest or lowest hanging fruit that is just going to get through the process, as quickly as possible, because, for us, like, head count is critical to me being able to do my job, but it's not like I'm given extra time to go out and like, find people, engage, et cetera, et cetera. And that's one of the reasons that I really like, the Rhize community, because making sure that people still have that level of community and connection and humanity in a corporate world where it's not on the first line leaders who are trying to hire that like we don't have the humanity. Like unfortunately, like it is so difficult when you have to like, reject a candidate, but you kind of have to continue just like moving, because that's how, the corporate machine works. But when I think about actual like layoffs and actual like company policies, and those things are so high up. And a lot of times, I like at my like last company, half the leaders on my team were impacted and by a layoff. And so that just leaves, again, more work for the people who are just like still in that role. And I feel like people, at least that like I'm exposed to, like everybody wants to do their best, and everybody wants to do their best in a hiring process. So like what can leaders be doing to still have that aspect of humanity? Is it being able to give more like candid feedback at the end of an interview process? Because I understand the templated emails, like some that's difficult. But again, it's like when you don't have time to like give so much thought to something, like is that something that's like valuable? Is that something that's helpful? Is that something that makes people feel connected? Or as opposed to feeling like dismissed? Like what could we do and work up to being more human hiring managers again?
Yeah, I think that I understand, and so do my members in Rhize, that there's like a fine line that employers, especially big corporate companies, there's a fine line they're walking between, there's a lot of laws, there's a lot of employment laws, there's a lot of labor laws, there's all of these things that we get. We know there's certain things you can't say to us because you don't want somebody who's unemployed and upset to take something that you put in writing in an email and run with it and put it somewhere, start a lawsuit, whatever. I think what I would love, and I think this is more of on an individual basis, if you're a hiring manager, I get that you might not be able to change the policies at your company, right? I get that you might not be able to put something in writing that you can't. But if you can kind of put yourself in that job seeker's shoes, how would you want to be communicated with? Whether that's listen, I can't tell you why we didn't pick you. Just wanted to let you know I really enjoyed speaking with you. This is, here's what I got from our conversation. You don't even have to give feedback. It's just the be a person aspect of it. Like, the one thing that job seekers don't get back is any feedback or any response. And I would rather get negative feedback and a rejection before silence. Because if you think about it, when you're working in any sort of working environment, it's give and take all day. It's me, it's you, it's our team, it's this, it's that. You are putting something out into the world and you are getting something back. When you're looking for work and you're constantly output, and you're not even getting an email response back, it feels very empty. It feels very hollow. It's like, we have people in Rhize all the time that are like, I think my email's broken, because there's no way I'm not even getting like an auto response. And that empty feeling is worse than any rejection anyone could get. And so I think, listen, okay, I know how to do an automated email. I know how to individually email somebody, and Rhize is not a big corporation, a big conglomerate. No one's paying me to do it, and I make sure to email people. I think that a hiring manager or a company could take a second to just send out an email, make a phone call. If you don't want to have it in writing, make a phone call. I got a phone call. I was applying for a bridge job. Long story short, didn't get it. The woman didn't want to put in writing why I didn't get it. She gave me a phone call. She's like, listen, I can't really, tell you why over email, because whatever, it was a mistake on our end, but this is what happened. I could sleep that night. So I think it's like, there are ways. And I think it's like, if you're a person, how would you want to be treated? And just do that.
And I feel like that's so helpful, because that empathy piece is so important, and there's so many emotions tied up in a job search process. And I know, like, on the other side of it, like, hiring managers are excited to give people an opportunity to get a job. Like, that is like one of like my favorite things, is like, oh my goodness, I can give someone a job, like I can really transform their life. But you also have to remember, like, okay, like on the flip side of it, if you're not giving someone, that job or that chance or that opportunity, especially if they're, a good candidate or a good fit, I agree. I know that there's like, restrictions, but at least giving them the respect that they deserve, of like communicating that is very impactful. That's like going to be like a big takeaway for me. Now, I want to kind of unpack this notion that people who are unemployed are not good candidates, because especially in this world where there's so many companies doing layoffs so consistently, like Microsoft just laid off thousands of people, it is impossible for me to believe that all of those people who are now technically unemployed, and I know you said that, the implication of unemployment is laziness. I don't know if y'all have a word that you prefer to use instead of unemployed, or if you even thought about that, because I mean, yeah, all of these people, who have been impacted by broader company downsizing decisions, the purpose of that is not because, again, like the people are not good at their job. It's because companies are trying to run more efficiently. That is more efficiently, they're trying to do more with less, however you want to spin it. So can we talk about like how people who have gone through, layoffs and who have been unemployed are still fantastic candidates, because they were doing this job a couple weeks ago. It doesn't mean that they're incapable of doing this job because of a broader business decision. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a couple good questions. I'm going to go through a couple of them at once. So in terms of the word unemployed, I didn't like it to describe the people in Rhize, only because every person I met, that would not be an adjective I would use to describe them ever. So that's why we rebranded. I don't think there should be shame in the word unemployed. I think we all have many words to describe ourselves, and unemployed is certainly not the only word people would use to describe me. And I think it's okay if these words with a traditionally negative connotation, we can use them if we want. If you don't want to, that's also fine. We had a call the other day in Rhize where somebody said that they don't like using that word, and they've been saying they're in a career transition, which that's what it is. Some people are saying they're in a life transition. I think it's however you want to frame it for yourself. At the end of the day, it all means the same thing. You're not working right now. But That's actually not even true because most people in Rhize are working to some capacity to keep the lights on, and they're still considering themselves unemployed because, you know, they're working jobs they don't want to work for the long term. So they have these bridge jobs or they're doing some freelance work, but it's not their thing. So it's a mixed bag of what we want to call ourselves. What was the other part of the question? Oh, the laziness aspect, right?
Yeah. When you're probably working harder to apply to thousands, hundreds of jobs, like that's a lot of work.
I think it's this code switching thing, right? So like if you have a job, you know what you're getting into every day. You know who your coworkers are, you know who you're talking to. I remember like when I worked for this one company for 5 years, I was on autopilot in the best way. I knew what to expect. I knew who I was going to talk to. I knew what project management meetings looked like. I knew what asset management meetings looked like. I was like a well-oiled machine, but it was all the same every day, which is great for growth, right? Because if you're in this routine, you can, find other avenues that you're interested in. Great. When you're unemployed, every single day is different. Every single minute is different. Every single hour is different. And the biggest difference is that you have choice over your entire day, but you feel like you're at the mercy of somebody else. So what I mean by that is like, you can sit and apply for hundreds of jobs, but if somebody interrupts my flow and is like, I have an interview, it's like, sure, my entire week's open. I'll wait around all week for you, but you don't. So the thing that's like the hardest, I think, for people who are unemployed, it's like, yes, it is a lot of work to apply for the job and to go down this path. I think the work though that goes unseen is the resilience and like the mental work that people are doing every day, not only to actually continue on and apply for jobs, but to be a member of their household, to be a member in their community, to be a parent. And then, going further with that, it's a lot of people know that the longer they're out of work, the less they use their skills. So how do you upskill? How do you take on projects? How do you keep everything fresh? Because I know if I'm unemployed for 12 months, so much happens innovation-wise or systems-wise that you have to continue to be up to date on what things are being used in your industry without having the same access to them as you did when you were at your job. Whether that means you need to sign up for a class or download a software or, find projects, you have to now think actively about keeping yourself up to par. Whereas when you were working, all of those things were in front of you. You were like, you had the systems, you had the boss, you had the mentor, you had the manager. All of those things are now gone and you have to do it yourself.
Yeah, and I can't even imagine like the emotional toll and the emotional labor and just the burnout that individuals are experiencing as they're going through this transition, because again, it's not your fault as an individual, but it is your responsibility to basically rebuild yourself. If it's rebrand yourself, it's positioned yourself to companies, if it's showing people that you still have value as an employee, again, which is, it kind of goes back to the question that I was asking of how do we unpack for employers that just because someone's been unemployed, especially when the majority of people who are searching for jobs right now are on the job market for over 6 months. That's a statistic according to LinkedIn. LinkedIn has all of the data, on people who are going through career transitions. So how do we make it clear to people that just because someone hasn't been working for a period of time does not mean that they're not valuable? And for the record, I've hired multiple people who've been, unemployed and out of work because they need jobs. I don't know why this is confusing, but if someone's, they're ready to work. And I also work with a lot of entry-level people. So I don't know if that maybe changes as people, progress in their careers and maybe there's more stigma. But since I'm working with people who are, pretty early in their careers, for me, it's not a huge deal. But do you have any thoughts on that or anything that's you've seen that we can just reframe of just because someone hasn't been, technology's not evolving that fast. It's not like you're out of work for 6 months and you forget how to use, Salesforce or something,
right.
So yeah, what are you saying?
So I think that this is where I understand, and we talked about it, right? Like the staff that's the first to go is the people usually in charge of hiring, which makes these like ATS type systems necessary. Because when you do need to hire someone, like, yeah, there needs to be a way to collect the information and sift through it. I think the way to combat that, like the stigma around it, is to give people a real chance. Like, I don't think you can use ATS to filter everybody out. I think people need to start looking at resumes again, because you get someone to an interview and they're able to articulate their story. And who cares if it's a resume gap? If they tell you, what they're doing, you get a better feel for someone this way. And then if you want to turn me down because you didn't like the way I described something or you weren't impressed by a story, fine. But like, again, it brings back the human element of it. It's like, if the conversation and you meeting four people and you guys don't work well together, you don't jive, there's no energy, I understand that more than I understand, well, you didn't make it through the ATS system. So I think in order to make this fair, I mean, it's so subjective, and it's like, it's just, how do you, I don't know. I think about it like when I was dancing.
Mm-hmm.
Auditions in the arts world are cattle calls. There's literally, like, you could show up to an audition, there's 800 people that show up. Sometimes there's not even a role because nobody's leaving the company, but everybody has to show up and try. And you don't really know what they're looking for till you get there. It seems like that now with the workforce. It's like somebody posts a job up there and like thousands of people apply, and no rhyme or reason, nobody gets it. Nobody knows why. It just seems so elusive. I don't know. I just think if you're really hiring, there's got to be a different way to do it. And it's bring people back into it.
I totally agree with what you're saying, and I want to get into some of like the like logistics of using like organization, like using platforms like LinkedIn or other job boards. But before we dive into that, I just had like one more question that kind of got sparked for me, because I had a resume gap prior to my current job. But it was, I decided to take a little break. And I actually was just talking to a friend who's in, my same position, who decided to take a 6-month break to travel through Africa, and then ended up coming back and, was able to get a job. And so do you feel like there's more of a stigma around having a career break, by choice, versus having a career break by, layoffs and or losing a job for some reason? And the reason I ask this is I'm like, is it in the positioning? Is it just in the bias? Is it in the stigma? Because again, there's people who, say, hey, I needed a mental health break. And I was pretty candid about that in my, interview. I was like, I was burnt out in my last job. I needed a break. I'm ready to get back to work. Do you want to hire me? And they're like, sure. Versus, I wanted someone who's on the other side of it. Oh, I really wanted to work. I was doing great. We were performing. My company raised too much in funding and then realized that they couldn't keep us all on payroll. I just feel like that it's so difficult for me to reconcile that internally, especially when unemployment, again, is so emotional. It impacts people's lives. It impacts their livelihoods. It impacts their sense of self-worth. It impacts their ability to provide for their family. It impacts their, it's just like, there's so many factors that maybe I'm getting agitated because it's so frustrating.
I think that you're completely, like, you're spot on with your question. And it is something we talk a lot about in Rhize, because there are actually so many people, for a variety of reasons, with employment gaps. I do think there's a stigma if you lose your job, versus if it's by choice. I always say if you're not working by choice or by chance. And I think if it's a choice, that can be seen as, she chose. She realized she had, mental health to take care of. That's admirable. She wanted to go, travel the world, and she had saved up enough money to take 6 months off and do whatever. It's like the steps to what you're saying. I think, unfortunately, that is looked at as something that's like, oh, wow, good for her. Yeah, that's definitely someone we want to hire, versus someone who lost a job. And it's like, well, why did they lose that job? Is it because they, they were on the lower end of things, and when people came through and cut people, they were the ones to go. Well, why were they the ones to go? Why did they not want to keep them? I think there's more unanswered questions, or people fill in the blanks more skeptically when it is not a candidate's choice. And that comes from my experience, and it comes from listening to members in Rhize speak about their experience. And I think it's unfortunate. We all have bias, right? Everybody has it. And it's like, how do you remove that and see just a person in their story versus like, well, if I lost my job, it would be this or that. I also think now I'm hopeful that like going forward, so many people have lost their jobs that this won't have to be explained. But I think we are in this interesting place where, the generation above us was at jobs for 30 years, 40 years. They worked at one place. That was the norm. You get a job, you stay there, you work with that company forever, and then you get to retire and you have this great retirement fund. That's not normal anymore. And so I think it's now just kind of like switching around that mindset, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's...
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I just feel like there's, always like gaps and always things that we can be doing. And, one of the things that I noticed, obviously, during COVID, when we switched to a lot of remote work, and I don't know if this is something you're seeing, but I have this assumption that people are more often impacted by layoffs if they're not in person, if they're not in an office, or if they are remote. I don't know if this is a trend that you're seeing, but I just feel like because of the way that companies are pushing return to office, and you used to work in corporate real estate. I mean, obviously they're paying a lot of money for these buildings, so they need the people. Yeah, it's not cheap. So they need, people, in their butt and seat doing their jobs. But, that makes me assume that there was this big push for a lot of remote work during COVID, and a lot of people enjoyed the remote work. A lot of people enjoyed the flexibility. There were more remote jobs. I am hearing, and I'm also seeing that there are fewer, especially in my industry in tech, there are way fewer remote jobs in tech than there were. I know a lot of people in Austin. Austin was a big tech hub. Austin had I was working remotely from Austin during COVID. And my company relocated me out to Denver because they're like, no more. You're going to go into the office. And I didn't have a problem with that because, again, like I felt like for me, I don't mind being in an office, but I'm just curious for like people who are going through a lot of job applications, is it more likely that, they might experience, job and, a lot less job stability being remote?
Couple of things I want to touch on. So I think that when workers are remote, it is easier to cut them, and not because of any other reason other than there's no emotional connection. So I think if you've never met somebody in person, it's a lot easier to just be like, well, see ya. So I do think remote work culture obviously helped during COVID, and I do think there's a lot of there's a lot of pros to remote work, and I think there's a world in which hybrid is like the way to go. But I think when you don't meet someone in person, it's easier to cut them. There are a lot of people in Rhize that were laid off because they lived in a different city than the company they were in, and when they called for the return to office, they were like, well, you hired me and I live here. And they're like, okay, well, you're going to move. And they're like, I'm not going to move. Like, you knew I lived here when you hired me and I'm not moving. So there's that aspect. I think right now too, we do surveys in Rhize all the time. People are willing to go into an office. I think the idea that like everybody wants to work remote is actually not true. I think there are a lot of people that want to work remote, but a vast majority of people are fine going into an office. They want the commute to be, easy. Everything it needs to be in flux, right? Like if I have a 2-hour commute, I'm not going in every day, but like, could I do 2 hours or 2 days a week? Yeah. There's a balance that I think is not being pushed out there that actually job seekers are fine with. A lot of job seekers want to go back to an office and be in person with people. And I think it's interesting because there are a lot of companies that are in person. They want people to come into the office, but they'll do all the interviews remote. And it's like, well, just have me come in. Like if we get to a certain point, like I should come in and meet people. Anyway, I just think The real estate is expensive, obviously, for offices. So I understand if you have a big campus, if you spent all this money, you're going to want that. You're going to want people to use it. But it's almost like we're 5 years out. We're past that. Like, you got to figure out a way to make it work, because in order to keep your employees happy, some of them want to stay home twice a week and work from home. Some of them want to, every Friday be able to do whatever. Some of them don't want to come into the office at all, and they actually work better, and you end up getting more out of them. So I think it's individual. We have to see this almost as like I don't want to say an individual basis, but like there's like a lot of blanket rules that I think need to be looked at again, and looked at on behalf of the company's goals.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And actually, you said something interesting. You're like, okay, if interviews are happening remotely, like why like not come in? I'm curious, like, do people like in your community, especially if they're getting pretty far in the interview process, do you think they could, ask a hiring manager? I think if someone asked me like, hey, Alexis, we've had 2 interviews or we've had 3, I would love to actually like come in and meet you in person. That's something that would resonate, with me. And I would say like, okay, that shows initiative, that shows that they're, like willing to. And then also to your point about, well, if someone hasn't met you, it's way easier to lay you off. I'm assuming, if someone's like met you in person, it's probably, like, especially if they're excited about you as a candidate, like it's harder to like, reject you. Is that something that you've considered, maybe like sharing as a potential tool or technique that might help job seekers? I'm curious.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot in Rhize. We always say, like, if you're in a place where you can meet somebody in person, do it. A lot of our members in the same cities meet up with each other in person just to meet up and be with someone. So I know when they're, like, looking for work and it's a company that's, like, down the street from them or, like, 30 minutes away, that is important to them. I think, but you just nailed it. Like, if you meet somebody in person, you interview them, you kind of have to tell them that you're not going to take them. You can't ghost them. So I think, and I understand, and we all do in Rhize, like I would say, and you can probably speak to this, hiring managers are the last people to know if a job is pulled. So you could go down this whole path of interviewing somebody and like you're ready to hire them and then it's not approved. And it's like, we know it's not you. We know it's not a decision that you're making. We know that nobody wants to hurt anybody, but I think it's harder than to ghost the person or to keep pushing them off if you've met them in person. And so I think there's like this like interesting dance around like, what can we do? What can't we do? What can we say? What can we not say? And then if we don't say anything, we're not hurting anybody's feelings and it's not my problem. And I think that's easier to do when you don't have a connection with somebody.
And that's also like a very like avoidant like tactic of just saying, okay, well, if I just don't address it, then nothing happens. Or if I just send an automated email, well, then, it does take the emotion and the personal touch out of it. And to your point earlier, it takes the humanity out of it. So, my hope for this like conversation is to just like really bring awareness to the struggles that people who are, unemployed are currently facing, to shed more light on like what Rhize is doing by building that community, by providing resources, by helping to support people as they go through these very challenging transitions. So if you had to like name like one main thing that you feel like the community like of Rhize like would need, or like one thing that if people wanted to like help or support, like what should the takeaway be? And obviously from a hiring manager's perspective, I'm hoping that the tidbits of like be a human and take a chance on people, because someone took a chance on me in my first role. Someone took a chance on me in my first leadership role. And I do think to your point earlier that, companies, hiring managers, organizations as a whole were more willing to take risks in the past. We have progressed to a very risk averse place. So if that is maybe, taking a chance, taking a risk, I hear that. But for the community, like that you're managing, what do you feel like is like the number one thing, aside from obviously getting a job, that, people could do to support, or that, would make some kind of positive impact?
I think so. I'm going to go at this with 2 angles. For employers, hiring managers, recruiters, the one thing that like would be helpful is transparency. Whatever that is, whatever that looks like, transparency and communication and empathy, I would say, are the biggest things people are looking for. Like, they already feel so down, they don't want to feel less than they already do. For friends, family, people that are support systems for unemployed people, listen with like the 2 ears, 1 mouth thing. Listen before you offer advice or words, because I think what happens is, and like this is what exhausted me after 3 layoffs, I didn't know how to explain myself any more than I already had to my support system. I didn't know how else to say what I was going through, because quite often, and in the best way, I was met with, but you're so great. I can't believe this is happening to you. What is I can't believe, no, you're doing everything right. Are you networking? Are you doing that? And it's not because they didn't mean well. It's because they didn't understand. They had never experienced it. A lot of them still haven't. The thing with Rhize is it's people that can meet you exactly where you're at. And what is so beautiful about the community is that no one has anything to give, because no one has a job, no one has anything. It's just people meeting each other exactly where they're at, listening and offering, and listening and offering. And it's like an exchange when there's no stakes. And I think that that's something that provides a level of like comfort, I guess is the best way I can describe it, and validation for these people. So that's my
I think that's amazing. And I just want you to be able to share with people, if they want to find you, if they want to find Rhize, if they want to support the community, how can they do it? What's the best way to get involved? Like, what is the easiest avenue to get in touch?
You can find Rhize at rhizetogether.com, and that's RHIZE together.com. There's like a link to join once you get on the website. We're on LinkedIn, so RHIZE, Rhize. I'm on TikTok, Giovanna.Ventola, and Instagram, Giovanna.Ventola. I think that's it. And then there's all the links in my bio, but I would say if you want to join Rhize or support Rhize, rhizetogether.com, and then my email's there, all of the things.
And that's incredible. And speaking of supporting Rhize, I know that we toyed around with this idea, but I am very hopeful and optimistic that we will be planning a joint charity fundraiser for Rhize and for people who are going to be impacted, or who have been impacted by career changes, by career transitions. My goal for this is to basically use molded impact to have like a positive impact, since we are a career focused, a career driven community. There's, the flip side of, making sure that we're doing our part to support people who are in the most need of career support, of career transition. So I'm very excited for people to learn more, share more. There'll be avenues to donate and just really help make sure that we can do as much as we can for this incredible community, because Giovanna, you're doing an incredible job. I'm so appreciative that we got connected. I'm very thankful that there are people like you in this world who are trying to have a positive impact on others going through one of the hardest times in their lives. So thank you for all your hard work and efforts.
Thank you. And thank you for reaching out and for, giving me a space to share the story, but more importantly, giving me a chance to talk about the people in Rhize and talk about what we're doing. And then, yeah, like you said, we're going to get together for a fundraiser in the future. So I'm excited about that.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Looking forward to connecting moving forward, and everybody stay tuned for the next episode.
Thank you.
Bye.